Not uncomfortable in a mild way, but actually physically painful. And then the emotional piece of all of this started to stack up too. My mood was all over the place. My anxiety was increasing. I did not feel like myself. And I think that was honestly one of the hardest parts because you are already dealing with all of these physical symptoms. And then on top of that, you are not even feeling mentally like you. And it starts to affect every area of your life, your relationships, your work, your social life, the way you show up every single day. So that was where I was when I finally went and got some answers and got my diagnosis. Now, getting the diagnosis itself was not straightforward either, and I think a lot of you can probably relate to this. I saw multiple doctors before someone actually sat down with me and took everything I was experiencing seriously. And I cannot tell you how many times I was told that what I was going through was just stress, or just something that happens when you get older, or just normal hormonal fluctuations. And every single time I heard that, I felt more and more invisible and more like maybe I was overreacting. And I want to say something really clearly here for anyone who is in that position right now. You are not overreacting. You know your body. You know when something is not right. And it is your right to keep advocating for yourself until someone actually listens to you and takes the time to get to the root of what is happening. Because the symptoms I was experiencing were not normal, and they were not something I had to just accept. And learning that eventually was genuinely life-changing. So when I finally got my diagnosis and we started to understand what was happening from a hormonal and metabolic standpoint, I felt two things simultaneously. I felt relief because finally I had a name for what I was experiencing, and I felt a little overwhelmed because I realized how much there was to learn and how much I would need to change. And that is kind of where the real journey began. The first year was honestly really messy, and I want to be honest about that because I think a lot of people share the highlight reel of their healing journey and not the part where you are just kind of fumbling around, trying everything and feeling frustrated because nothing seems to be working. I made a lot of mistakes in that first year. I was consuming so much content and reading so many things and getting advice from so many different directions that I kind of just threw everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. I would see something that said a certain food was good for hormone health, and I would add it in, and then I would see something else that said a certain supplement was going to fix everything, and I would order it without really knowing if that was what my body actually needed. And the problem with that approach is that without actually knowing what is happening in your specific body, you are just guessing. And sometimes you are guessing in a direction that actually makes things worse. Like one thing I did early on that backfired was eating a ton of raw cruciferous vegetables, because I had heard they were great for estrogen metabolism and hormones. And yes, they can be great, but for me at that time with the gut issues I was dealing with, they were causing so much bloating and discomfort. And I had no idea that the thing I thought was helping me was actually contributing to the problem. So that was a really valuable lesson in understanding that healthy is not one size fits all, and that what works for someone else's body may not be what your body needs right now. The turning point for me was when I started working with an integrative medicine doctor. And I say this so often, and I know it can start to sound repetitive, but I genuinely cannot overstate how important this was for my progress. Because instead of just looking at my symptoms on the surface, we actually started digging into the root causes. We did comprehensive lab work. We did a stool test. We identified that I had candida overgrowth and leaky gut, in addition to everything else that was going on hormonally. And suddenly things started to make so much more sense. The chronic bloating, the skin issues, the fatigue, so much of it was connected to what was happening in my gut. And once I started addressing that, the dominoes started to fall in a really beautiful way. And I share this because I know so many of you are doing everything you think you are supposed to be doing and still not feeling better. And I want you to know that there is probably a root cause that has not been identified yet, and that is not your fault. That is just why it is so important to get the right testing done so you actually know what you are working with instead of just continuing to guess.